I really enjoyed Annette's talk last week. If you were here, or you've caught up online, because it is on YouTube now, Annette was using the segments of an orange to help us think about and pray through these fruit of the Spirit, these 9 qualities that God grows in our lives, qualities which start with the most important quality or virtue of all, which is love. So how do we know that love is of paramount importance? Well, because Jesus says it is. As when he was asked what the most important of all the commandments was, he replied that it's love, famously saying that we're to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. And then secondly, to love your neighbor as yourself. Famous words, as I say, and they sound great, timeless, universal truth extolling the virtues of love. And yet you'll know as well as me that almost just as timeless as love is our tendency as humans to be unsure or perplexed about what love actually is. In fact, trying to understand love is arguably the topic that's inspired poets and authors and playwrights, and in particular, songwriters for centuries. I mean, if there were no songs ever written about love, I doubt we'd have ever heard of Frank Sinatra or the Beatles or Ed Sheeran or Taylor Swift. Take love out of their back catalogue and very few songs would exist from any of them. And yet I wonder if that's perhaps the point, that love is such a rich topic for singers and songwriters precisely because it is almost beyond definition. Indeed, it seems the only real way to define love is to look at the range of qualities that love produces. So, for example, if we turn to the most famous Bible passage of all about love, we'll see that love is defined by the emotions, the actions, the behavior, and the outcomes that flow from love. And again, some familiar, maybe famous words here from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, where it says, love is patient, love is kind, does not envy, does not boast, it is not proud, does not dishonor others, it's not self-seeking, it's not easily angered, keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. And it's a beautifully poetic passage, that one. But one in which we see love being defined by what it produces. Practical, specific, recognizable actions. So as we see, love means being patient. Love means being kind. Love means not keeping a mental tally of the ways we might have been wronged. Love means being trusting, and so on and so on. And I guess in some ways, all of that may sound somewhat obvious. I'd suggest it's also, certainly for me, incredibly challenging as well. See, I can tell Gemma, my wife, that I love her. I can tell my kids that I love them. I can tell my friends that I love them. But unless I'm patient with them, unless I treat them with kindness, then me simply saying I love you can feel pretty empty, can perhaps have very little meaning. I guess just as the first, and I'd say foremost, fruit of the Spirit is love, so we might say that love, in turn, bears its own fruit of patience, kindness, humility, forgiveness, trust, perseverance, and so on. All qualities and all ways of treating other people which are evidence that we do indeed love them. And so if the aim of life is to grow in love, which I think it is overall, then I suspect that actually that means working on being patient with people, seeking ways to be kind to them, offering them forgiveness and so on. Since these are the actions, these are the definition of what it means to actually Love one another. Now, how might we grow in these love-defining qualities? Well, as Annette said last week, prayer is crucial. Prayer prompted by segments of an orange, if we wish. Prayer for God's help in really thinking through what being more patient, more kind, and so on might look like. How might we know what these qualities, these products of love look like? Well, I'd suggest perhaps this morning just a little 3-part exercise that we can do as part of our prayers for these qualities. So, for example, let's pick patience today. If we're praying for more patience in life, I wonder if a first step is to reflect with God on ways in which we see Jesus being patient. We think through the gospel stories. How does Jesus treat people with patience? Who is he particularly patient with? And what might we learn from his example? Secondly, we can reflect with God on ways in which we see ourselves perhaps sometimes being impatient. Times when we get easily frustrated with someone because they weren't sticking to our schedule, But then thirdly, holding Jesus' example in mind and our own experiences in mind. Thirdly, we can then reflect on how actually we might have been more patient, more like Jesus in those times when we've struggled. What might greater patience, that demonstration of love, look like in practice? And for me, again, it sounds quite simple, but it can be pretty transformational with how we treat one another. Because I think that imagination, that commitment, well, that can become our prayer, asking for God's help so that the next time we're in a challenging situation, actually we're more able and inclined to put the ways of patience, the ways of Jesus, ultimately the ways of love, into practice. So how, in this example, is Jesus patient? How have we lacked patience? And what might greater patience for us look like in practice? And we can do that exercise for all sorts of other qualities that define what love is. Indeed, as we do that, not only will we grow in each of those individual virtues, but ultimately we'll grow overall in love. So this week, I'd suggest, yes, we can pray that God will help us to be more loving, and that's a great kind of umbrella prayer for us to pray. But I suspect perhaps a more practical, a more recognizable, maybe even a more fruitful prayer might in turn be to ask God to help us to be more patient, more kind, more caring, more compassionate, because it's through expressing these kind of qualities and more that will grow into the people of love that God has ultimately called us to be. Now, we're going to listen to a song which stems from that passage in 1 Corinthians. I don't know if you might have heard it before, but it's a nice, reflective, gentle song. But it's quite a prayer as well. So as this plays, let's use this perhaps to think about what I've been saying, but also perhaps as our own way of committing ourselves on this Monday morning to God. This idea of, yes, we want to be loving people, but what does that love look like in practice? Well, let me be patient, let me be kind, and so on. So let's listen and use this song as our own prayer.
Love is patient, love is kind. It has no arrogance or pride. It seeks the good of others first. It keeps no record of wrong or hurt. It finds no joy in wickedness, rejoices in the truth. Through it all it will endure. Love will never fail. Love will never, never fail. Love will all prophecy will cease, though all knowledge it will fade. Oh, an end will come to speech, even death will pass away. We will see you face to face, and your mercy will prevail. Faith and hope, they will remain. Oh, love will never fade.